In 2002, Ford secretly built a Mustang so wild that even top executives didn't know about it. Hidden beneath its hood wasn't a turbocharged V6 or even their iconic V8, but a custom-made, high-revving V10 engine crafted by a team of rebel engineers working after hours. It was powerful enough to outrun the legendary Terminator Cobra and fast enough to embarrass a Corvette. So, why did Ford keep this V10 Mustang locked away? Let's find out. But first, hit that subscribe button for more about car news. Before we get exactly into why this crazy one-of-a-kind Mustang vanished from the spotlight, we need to go back to the early 2000s. Back then, the Mustang was in the middle of its new edge era, a time when Ford was already pushing performance boundaries with models like the 2000 Cobra R and later the legendary 2003 Terminator Cobra. But quietly, behind closed doors, something even wilder was happening. In 2002, a handful of Ford engineers decided the Mustang deserved even more power. These weren't executives or marketing people. They were passionate engine guys who spent their days surrounded by aluminum blocks, camshafts, and pistons. They knew exactly what they wanted: to build a Mustang that would shock the world. And instead of just taking the easier route, just slapping a bigger supercharger or turbo onto the existing Mustang V8, they chose something truly radical. They were going to build a Mustang with a V10 engine. Now, let's pause for a second, because this is the part where things get wild. Ford already had a V10 engine in their lineup, the massive 6.8-liter Triton used in heavy-duty trucks like the F250 and F350. This engine was tough, torquey, and could pull heavy trailers without breaking a sweat, but there was no way this tall iron block truck motor would fit into the relatively compact engine bay of a Mustang without some serious surgery. To squeeze that truck engine into a Mustang, they'd need to completely redesign the car's chassis, raise the hood line, and probably ruin the car's handling due to all the extra weight over the front wheels. Clearly, that wasn't an option. So, instead, this daring group of engineers, they got creative. They took the compact aluminum modular V8 engine from the Mustang Cobra R, a car already famous for its powerful, lightweight 5.4-liter V8, and literally cut and combined two engine blocks to create a totally new, lightweight, short-deck aluminum V10. How exactly did they do that? First, they started with two identical 4.6-liter aluminum block V8 engines from the Cobra R. These were Ford's high-performance DOHC, dual overhead camshaft modular engines, lightweight and designed to rev high. The engineers, they literally chopped off two cylinders from one V8 block and carefully grafted them onto the front of the other block with meticulous precision. They welded and machined those sections together, creating a seamless single-piece aluminum V10 block. Next, they had to create cylinder heads that could handle this new 10-cylinder arrangement. Again, these engineers went back to the Cobra R parts bin, custom casting new aluminum cylinder heads based directly on the Cobra R's dual overhead cam cylinder head design. These new heads retained the high flow characteristics necessary for high RPM performance. Each cylinder head had two camshafts, controlling 4 valves per cylinder, allowing the engine to breathe freely at high RPM. This wasn't some lazy, low-revving truck motor. No, it was built to rev, and rev hard. Then came perhaps the trickiest part, designing a crankshaft to manage the unusual firing pattern. Typical V10s like the Triton truck motor were even fire, meaning the cylinders fired evenly spaced apart. But because this new V10 was derived from a V8 engine, it naturally became an odd-fire design, meaning the cylinders fired at uneven intervals. To handle this, the team machined a special forged steel crankshaft from 4130 billet steel with a unique 72-degree offset between throws, which resulted in a very distinctive and exotic-sounding exhaust note. Trust me, this Mustang didn't rumble. It roared, screamed, and crackled like an Italian supercar rather than an American muscle car. But creating an engine mechanically, that was one thing. Actually getting it to run smoothly was another massive challenge. You see, engines need an electronic brain, a computer called an ECU, that controls fuel injection, ignition timing, airflow, and 100 other details. The problem was, Ford didn't have any ECU designed to handle this weird 10-cylinder, odd-fire arrangement. They tried using the existing Triton truck V10 ECUs, but those were set up for even fire engines. So, what did these ingenious engineers do? They came up with a solution that sounds straight out of a mad science lab. They took two separate ECUs, each designed to control one bank of 5 cylinders independently. That's right, two ECUs strapped together, working in tandem, each one believing it was controlling half of an inline 5-cylinder engine. It sounds like a mess, I know, but somehow it worked beautifully. By the time the prototype engine fired up for the first time, everyone knew they'd created something extraordinary. Let's put this into perspective. This handcrafted 5.8-liter aluminum V10 produced a jaw-dropping 426 horsepower at 6,500 RPM and an equally impressive 400 pounds per foot of torque at 5,200 RPM, all without forced induction. Those were some serious figures for a naturally aspirated engine in 2002, easily surpassing Ford's own supercharged Terminator Cobra, which made about 490 horsepower at the time. But the raw horsepower numbers, that didn't tell the whole story. If you were one of the lucky few allowed to experience this beast firsthand, and very few people outside Ford ever did, you'd immediately notice its uniquely exotic personality. When you fired up the engine, you wouldn't hear the familiar low rumble of a Mustang V8. Instead, you'd hear a distinctive metallic roar, high-pitched and aggressive, like something from a Ferrari or Lamborghini. It sounded almost alien under the Mustang's familiar hood, and when you pushed the throttle, the response was instant, sharp, and thrilling. The odd-fire crankshaft didn't just give this Mustang a distinctive exhaust note, it also created vibrations and sensations unlike any Mustang before or since. You could literally feel every cylinder firing, resonating through the steering wheel, gearshift, and seats. It was raw, visceral, and utterly addictive. But all this engineering madness, it had a real purpose. Ford wasn't just experimenting. They wanted to create a Mustang capable of rivaling cars like the Corvette Z06 and even the V10-powered Dodge Viper. At the time, Ford didn't have a true halo car apart from the secretive Ford GT program, and they desperately wanted something dramatic to catch the public's imagination. This V10 Mustang, that was their bold vision. A vehicle designed to push the limits of what a Mustang could be, to inspire Ford executives and prove that their team could build something truly groundbreaking. Now, as cool as all this sounds, there's a reason you've probably never seen one. Because the Ford executives, despite being blown away by this wild creation, they quickly realized mass-producing a V10 Mustang was going to be almost impossible. Here's why. First, the engine was incredibly complex and it was expensive to build. If you remember, the engineers literally spliced together two engine blocks. Imagine trying to do that for 1,000 cars on an assembly line. It just wasn't feasible. Ford needed an engine that was easier and cheaper to produce. Plus, remember that whole ECU situation? Yeah, using two separate computers to control one engine, that wouldn't exactly fly in a production car. Creating a brand new ECU for such a limited production run, it just wasn't worth the cost. Second, the timing, it was all wrong. Ford was already working on their flagship performance car, the Ford GT, which launched in 2005. The GT was set to be their halo car, a supercar meant to dominate headlines and rival cars like the Viper and Corvette directly. If Ford had produced the V10 Mustang, it would have stepped on the GT's toes, stealing its spotlight. And let's be real, Ford didn't want a cheaper Mustang competing with their own premium supercar. It just didn't make any sense from a business standpoint. Finally, we have to talk about practicality. As thrilling as this V10 Mustang was, it wasn't exactly a smooth daily driver. That massive power and torque, it came with lots of vibrations and harshness. The clutch was heavy, the gearshift tough to manage, and pushing an engine past 5,000 RPM made the whole car feel like it might just rattle apart. Sure, it's fun on a racetrack or even a drag strip, but commuting in stop-and-go traffic? Yeah, probably not. So, what happened to the secret Mustang after Ford decided not to produce it? Did they crush it, scrap it, or bury it away in some forgotten warehouse? Well, not exactly. Thankfully, some dedicated Ford employees, they quietly preserved the car. Today, it sits hidden away in Ford's private archives, occasionally brought out to surprise visitors or journalists lucky enough to see it in person. It's like automotive Bigfoot, rarely seen, often talked about, and always legendary. But even though this Mustang never hit dealerships, its legacy still lives on. See, this crazy experiment influenced how Ford approached Mustang performance models afterwards. The lesson learned from building a unique, high-performance engine, it pushed Ford engineers to be even bolder with future cars, like the modern Shelby GT350 and GT500 Mustangs. Those cars wouldn't exist without projects like the secret V10 Mustang paving the way. And here's the fun part. Ford didn't totally abandon the idea of a V10 after this Mustang project. The company actually considered a larger 7-liter V10 for some concept cars, like the Ford 427 sedan and even the Shelby Cobra concept car. These prototypes showcase the real potential of the engine, pushing close to 600 horsepower. Insane numbers for the mid-2000s. But again, due to timing, emissions regulations, and changing market demands, none of these V10 concepts ever made it past the prototype stage. Today, the secret V10 Mustang stands as one of the most intriguing what-ifs in automotive history. If Ford had produced it, who knows how it might have changed the muscle car landscape? Could it have dethroned the Corvette? Could it have challenged European supercars? We'll never truly know. If you enjoyed this dive into Ford's craziest Mustang, smash the like button, subscribe, and drop a comment letting us know which legendary car you want us to uncover next.